By adolescence, his behavior was alarmingly erratic. He showed a disturbing fascination with dead animals, and he exhibited a shocking lack of impulse control when he was caught urinating on his teacher's desk. His fascination of dead animals and his profound lack of impulse control would later reveal his twisted and dark mind. You won't want to miss this psychological analysis of Herb Baumeister. Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I talk about the psychology behind the crimes. Stick around because I'm going to talk about a serial killer you may not have heard about. He may not be as well known as Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, but believe me, he is just as diabolical. If you like learning about criminal psychology, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and like this video for more criminal mental health stories like this one. Today, I'm analyzing the mental health indicators of Herb Baumeister. These are my professional speculations. It's not a diagnosis. Herb lived in a sprawling 18-acre farm in rural Indiana, where kids played by the pool and families gathered for barbecues. I grew up in Indiana, and let me tell you, the sunsets are stunning. The cornfields and the soybean fields make you feel just free. And there's an occasional gravel road and train tracks. It's just nothing like living in the Midwest. And the seasons are breathtaking. It's in the Midwest. Nothing bad happens in the slow-moving Midwest, right? Wait until you hear about this story. On his farm lay a nightmare of 1,000 human bone fragments from at least 11 strangled men, discarded like forgotten trash. The owner? Not a loner in the shadows, but Herb Baumeister, a successful businessman, devoted husband, and a father of 3. Doesn't sound like a serial killer, but wait till you find out. He lived a double life that ended in death by suicide when the truth clawed its way out. What twisted psychology turns a pillar of the community into a predator? Today, we're zeroing in on Herb Baumeister's mental health indicators, the red flags that scream for intervention, but it never came. What hidden trigger from his childhood might have set this all in motion? We're going to talk about that right now. But first, I wanted to offer a trigger warning. We're going to talk about violence and mental illness and death by suicide. Viewer discretion is advised. As we dissect Herb's psyche, I'll weave in key moments from his life to show how his indicators didn't appear overnight. They built like a storm. He was born in 1947 to a strict, affluent family in Indianapolis. Herb seemed normal at first glance, but early cracks hinted at a deeper issue. As a licensed counselor, I see patterns like his in cases where untreated disorders spiral into tragedy. Herb evaded adult evaluation based on reported behaviors and teen assessments. But here's what stands out. Think about this for a moment. How many quirks do you dismiss in loved ones? You know, those little odd things that they might do. Well, Herb's family avoided it altogether. Maybe they just said, well, he's just a kid and he's doing kid things. But it ended up costing everything. But what if one overlooked incident in his teens unlocked the killer within? Oh, let's break it down. We'll list the main mental health indicators for clarity, but I'll explain on each, tying his backstory to show the progression. This keeps us focused on the psychology while painting the full picture. The first indicator is paranoid schizophrenia, a teen diagnosis that was untreated. Herb was diagnosed as a teenager after exhibiting bizarre behaviors like playing with dead animals and urinating on his teacher's desk, acts that scream disconnection from social norms. This disorder often involves delusions of grandeur or persecution, which might explain his adult compartmentalization, running a thriving thrift store chain by day while allegedly cruising gay bars at night, luring men to their deaths. In counseling terms, untreated schizophrenia can warp reality, turning internal chaos into external control seeking. Herb married in 1971, but later in 1972, he spent 2 months in the psychiatric hospital after his father's death. Was grief the trigger, or a lifelong storm that was brewing? How did this lead to his first game that hinted at strangulation? What if he had early intervention and they caught it early and gave him the therapy that he needed and perhaps even medication? Could that have prevented the tragedy that was to come? We'll never know. Next is antisocial personality disorder. It's a co-diagnosis that was evident in his lack of empathy, marked by a blatant disregard for others' rights and feelings that showed in Herb's childhood cruelty. Dissecting pets wasn't boys being boys. It was a classic red flag for emergent psychopathy. As an adult, it manifested in a double life, charming neighbors and co-founding Save-A-Lot stores in the 80s, yet reportedly strangling victims, intimately posing bodies and dumping them on his Fox Hollow Farm property. The thrill of power over vulnerable men, many from Indy's gay scene, points to a callous exploitation. His marriage to Julie crumbled under gaslighting. She'd find bruises from his rough play choking during intimacy, dismissed as jokes. By the 90s, as his business failed and amid bankruptcies, this disorder likely amplified his rages and evasions, leading to at least 11 confirmed murders between 1993 and 1996. In my practice, I see how untreated ASPD erodes relationships. Herb's family paid the price. But what chilling discovery in his car exposed the depth of his deceit? His wife Julie found Polaroids of bound men in his car. Can't imagine what that might have felt like. Herb denied any wrongdoing as business as usual. A little bizarre, for sure. That's the disorder's deceit at work. But why target gay men? Hold that thought and consider what repressed part of himself was really trying to kill. Next is possible sexual paraphilia or sadism. Strangulation wasn't random. It was ritualistic, tying into reports of Herb's bedroom games with his wife, choking her too hard and too often. This suggests a fusion of arousal and violence common in serial offenders, where control becomes eroticized. Rumors of Herb's repressed sexuality swirled. He targeted gay men, perhaps grappling with internalized homophobia from his conservative upbringing. His 1994 near miss when a victim escaped from a plastic bag suffocation at the farm, it highlights an escalation. And as a counselor, I've flagged this as severe paraphilic disorder, needing intervention, but it was untreated. It spiraled into post-mortem assaults and shallow graves across his estate. The 1996 bone discovery, over 11,000 bone fragments of a graveyard, unchecked impulses. It was Herb's secret graveyard on his farm. Linked this to his teen oddities, the bizarre acts like wondering about urine's taste, small seeds of massive horrors. What if early therapy had addressed the shame? But here's the twist. How did his failed political run feed into his sadistic cycle? Next is compartmentalization and disassociation. It's a psychological coping mechanism. Herb mastered the splitting in his life. PTA dad by morning, predator by night. This detachment, often rooted in schizotypical or schizophrenic traits, allowed him to host family events amid buried bodies. They were walking around on ground with the dead bodies and bones underneath. Post-1995, the divorce filing from his wife, as police closed in, he fled to Canada and died by suicide on July 3, 1996. A gunshot in a park and a note reading, "This is the only way." It screams avoidance of consequences, a final act of control. In mental health terms, disassociation protects the ego but destroys lives. Herb's untreated youth set the stage, with adult stressors like business failure cracking the facade. But what rage-filled outburst at his kids revealed the mask slipping? The ultimate gap? How did no one connect the dots sooner? Neighbors saw Herb as a normal guy. He was out mowing lawns, doing things that people normally do. But they didn't see what was behind the closed doors. That's the danger of denial. And imagine, what if one survivor had an escape? Would the body count be double or triple? Next is narcissistic traits and internalized shame. A high achiever mask hiding deep inadequacy. His 1984 failed mayor run and his rage at kids over trivial things, this could stem from a strict father who minimized his issues. Early animal play were power grabs over the weak, evolving into human targets. As debts mounted in the 90s, shame fueled the killings, reclaiming dominance. These mental health indicators are not insulated. They interlock like a deadly puzzle. What does Herb's story teach us about spotting signs today? But first consider this. How close was he to being caught in 1994? And why did the police let him walk? So what did you think about the Herb Baumeister case and the mental health indicators? He had so many different psychological layers, even in adolescence, and yet he didn't get the help that he needed early on. Now, I'm not saying that people who have these indicators early on are going to end up like Herb and be a serial killer, but in Herb's case, that exactly happened. And how many times do these mental health disorders get overlooked or dismissed, and people don't get the help that they need early on? That's a tragedy of this case. Herb struggled, and he had a lot of shame and a lot of things that were going on in his mind that he couldn't help, and it wasn't being treated. And then he went out and just lived out his fantasies, and people died, lots of people, and they were affected. And the story is heartbreaking for Herb. Yes, he was a serial killer, but he wasn't always a serial killer. When we don't give people the help that they need and either ignore it or pretend that it's not there, it can manifest itself in traumatic and dramatic ways, just like here. What did you think about this case? Did you agree with my mental health analysis? Did you learn anything new? Drop it below in the comments and let me know if you have another case that you want me to cover. Thank you for joining me today. Stay curious and stay safe.